Mako Nishimura is widely regarded as the only woman ever formally accepted as a full member of Japan's traditionally male-dominated Yakuza. After earning a reputation for such extreme violence that a Yakuza boss personally recruited her, she spent over 30 years overseeing prostitution, drug trafficking, and brutal debt collection. She eventually became known as the Mistress of Finger Cutting for carrying out the ritual amputations required of members who broke the gang's code. After leaving the Yakuza, she dedicated her life to helping former gang members escape organized crime, find jobs, reconnect with their families, and build new lives outside of the underworld. In 1989, Rudy Linares held hospital staff at gunpoint before disconnecting his 15-month-old son Samuel's life support and cradling the boy as he died. Samuel had suffered irreversible brain damage after choking on a balloon months earlier, and although doctors agreed he would never recover, Illinois law prevented them from removing the ventilator because he was not legally brain dead. Linares was initially charged with murder, but a grand jury refused to indict him, and he ultimately pleaded guilty only to unlawful use of a weapon. This is the harrowing skull of a man with Proteus syndrome, a rare and awful condition characterized by the overgrowth of skin, organs, tissues, and bones. Nikola Tesla originally expected to live to the age of 150, but later lowered this estimate to 135 years when he was forced to give up alcohol due to prohibition. He thought that consuming alcohol was good for the body and was a heavy drinker as a result. Tesla ended up dying at the age of 86. When revolutionary hero Guy Fawkes was convicted of high treason in 1605, his punishment was to be hanged, drawn, and quartered, meaning he would be hanged almost to the point of death, have his intestines and sex organs removed while still alive, decapitated, and have his limbs torn off. After the sentencing, Fawkes said "fuck that" and leapt from the gallows so that the rope broke his neck and killed him immediately. The drawing and quartering was still performed on his corpse, and his body parts were paraded around London. A British Marine had a leg tattoo of Liverpool's motto, "You'll never walk alone." But after a major injury in Afghanistan, his leg was amputated, and the surgeon had to cut the tattoo so it now read, "You'll never walk." Author Lois Duncan wrote many popular crime and suspense novels throughout the 70s and 80s, but she essentially stopped writing completely when her own daughter became the victim of an unsolved murder case in 1989. In 1950, a church in Nebraska exploded 5 minutes after choir practice was supposed to start. But miraculously, all 15 members of the choir were late that day for different reasons, and not a single person was hurt. In 1977, the University of Evansville men's basketball team was involved in a tragic plane crash. The crash killed everyone on the team except for one young man who didn't make the trip due to an injury. But just 2 weeks after the crash, the only surviving player, 18-year-old statistician David Furr, was killed by a drunk driver. After delivering important components for the atomic bomb in 1945, the USS Indianapolis was torpedoed by a Japanese submarine off the coast of the Philippines, resulting in the worst shark attack in human history. It started with dead bodies suddenly being pulled underwater, and once first blood was drawn, the initial survivors soon found themselves surrounded by hundreds of sharks. Those without lifeboats were forced to huddle together in groups and attempt to shield themselves, but it only worked for so long. The men could feel the sharks constantly bumping them from below, never knowing when they'd become the next victim. On the third day, dehydration made some of them act delusional and violent, forcing the rest of the group to push them away and leave them to die. After 4 horrific days, the U.S. Navy finally received word of the ship's sinking. Out of the original 1,200 men on board the ship, only 316 made it home alive. Gu Lagoon. This underwater river can be found in Mexico's Cenote Angelita. It's filled with hydrogen sulfide, which is more dense than salt water, creating a whole new layer of flowing water. The Onagadori is a historic Japanese breed of chicken known for its ridiculously long tail. It's considered to be a special national treasure of Japan since only about 250 exist. Diagonal witch windows exist almost exclusively in the state of Vermont. They come from a superstition that says witches can't fly their broomsticks through tilted windows. Under insanely rare circumstances, there's a chance that a roll cloud can turn spherical. This one was observed in Japan in 2016. Thought to be extinct for over 3 decades, the starry night harlequin toad was officially rediscovered in 2019. The unique-looking toad can only be found in a sacred location in the forests of Colombia. When Queen Elizabeth visited the set of Game of Thrones in 2014, she refused to sit on the Iron Throne. She was simply following an old law that prohibits the queen from sitting on any foreign throne. Reading the Bible or watching porn are both strictly forbidden crimes punishable by death in North Korea. In 1972, Neil Armstrong visited the town of Longholm, Scotland. When he got there, he was read a 400-year-old law declaring that any Armstrong found in the town should be hanged. Here's a 1955 photo of a woman being ticketed for wearing a bikini on a public beach in Italy. U.S. law requires that eggs sold in supermarkets must be washed, while UK law requires that eggs sold in supermarkets must not be washed. Both do it to prevent salmonella. In ancient Rome, men found guilty of rape had their testicles crushed between two stones. Mississippi didn't make it illegal to buy or sell a child until 2009. Only after a woman tried to sell her granddaughter online for $2,000 and a car. Legislators realized there was no law to punish her under, so they finally made one. A man named Adam Curlykale tattooed more than 90% of his body, including his eyeballs. He also dyed all of his hair white in order to look like a photo-negative version of himself. A man named Henry Damon has undergone substantial body modifications to look like Red Skull. He removed his nose and tattooed his entire face red and his eyeballs black. A woman named Pixie Fox has undergone 15 surgeries to look like Jessica Rabbit. She even had 6 of her ribs removed to replicate the cartoon character's tiny waist. After removing his nose, this Brazilian tattoo artist spent $500 to have tusks attached to his teeth. And finally, a Filipino man has undergone 23 surgeries to look like Superman. Doctors urged him to stop after they found out he had been using poisonous fillers to achieve his dream. Soviet cosmonaut Sergei Krikalev set the world record for time traveling after spending 803 days in orbit around the Earth. According to Einstein's theory of relativity, this means Sergei effectively traveled 0.02 seconds forward in time. The oldest known operating bar in the world is Sean's Bar in Ireland. Archaeological records have found that the bar has been serving people since 900 AD, well over 1,000 years ago. Former President of Liberia Charles King holds the world record for the most fraudulent election in history. He won the 1927 election with 234,000 votes in a country with 15,000 voters. In 1964, 17-year-old Randy Gardner set the world record for the longest time without sleep after staying awake for 11 straight days. The Guinness Book of World Records refuses to validate any attempt to break this since it's so dangerous to human health. This photo of Sean and Michael McQuilkin was taken at Sequoia National Park just seconds before they were struck by lightning in 1975. All 3, including their photographer sister, survived the strike, but younger brother Sean suffered third-degree burns and spent nearly 6 months in a coma. After being unable to overcome the physical and mental toll of the incident, Sean sadly ended up taking his own life in 1989. After having an allergic reaction to asthma medicine in 2009, Tennessee woman Shanina Isom has been suffering from a mysterious skin condition that causes her to grow fingernails in place of her hair. In 2004, 200 women armed with kitchen knives stormed into an Indian courthouse before stabbing and murdering Aku Yadav, a gang leader, serial killer, and rapist who kept escaping his sentencing due to bribes. Every single woman later claimed responsibility for killing him. In 2016, Glenda Blackwell bought a $10 scratch-off ticket to prove to her gambling husband that they were a total waste of money. Fortunately, she failed to prove her point since the ticket ended up being a $1 million jackpot winner. In 2017, a group of undercover cops in Detroit who were posing as drug dealers tried to arrest another group of undercover cops who were posing as drug buyers. In 2001, Jason and Jenny Cairns Lawrence went on vacation in New York City when the World Trade Center was struck on 9/11. 4 years later, in 2005, they went on vacation in London when 4 suicide bombers attacked the London bus network, killing 52 people. Then in 2008, they were in Mumbai when once again the city was attacked by 10 terrorists who killed nearly 200 people. All 3 tragedies were the worst terrorist attacks in history for each country. And now Jason and Jenny just stay home. Dating back to the early 1700s, the Old Gentleman of Rahe is the oldest diving suit in the world. It was once used to inspect the bottoms of sailing vessels. This is one of the 4,000-year-old preserved wagons found near Lake Savan in Armenia. Made completely out of oak wood, they're the oldest known wagons on the planet. The oldest working battery has been powering a bell at Oxford University since 1840. Nobody knows what the battery is made of and doesn't want to risk destroying it to find out. Discovered in 1963, Göbekli Tepe in modern-day Turkey is the oldest known temple in the world. The site was purposely buried around 9000 BC for unknown reasons. However, this allowed the structures to be preserved for future discovery and research. As of now, ground-penetrating radar has revealed that less than 5% of the site has been excavated. Harriet the Galapagos tortoise was collected by Charles Darwin in 1835 while he was discovering evolution. She died at the age of 175 as a beloved member of Steve Irwin's Australia Zoo. Queen Elizabeth had two first cousins named Nerissa and Catherine Lyon who were severely disabled. Nerissa was publicly pronounced dead in 1940 while her sister Catherine was said to have died in 1961. But it was later revealed that they were actually tucked away in a mental asylum without any visits from the royal family until their actual deaths in 1986 and 2014. The US military buys a prank fart spray called liquid ass to train and prepare medics for the stench of the battlefield. This is a 1969 photo of Roman Polanski kneeling next to the door where the word pig is written in his wife Sharon Tate's blood. While Polanski was working on a film in Europe, Tate was stabbed 16 times by members of the Manson family when she was 8.5 months pregnant. Polanski has said that the murders changed him forever and that not being there is his greatest life regret. This photo shows the dramatic differences between two boys who were exposed to the same smallpox source in 1901. One of them was vaccinated, the other was not. In 1985, a 13-year-old Colombian girl was trapped up to her waist in volcanic mud flow. Knowing she would die, volunteers and rescuers did their best to comfort her. She died after 60 hours, and her photo became iconic. A grieving mother in Florida decided to add a sandbox to the grave of her baby boy so that his older brother could play with him. A student was once so stressed during an exam that he simply couldn't take it anymore. So he put 2 pencils up his nostrils and headbutted the table, forcing them through his brain. He died instantly and all the other students got A's. In 2016, brothers Bob and James Stockless both won the lottery on the same day with randomized numbers. But one was way happier than the other since Bob won $7 while his brother James took home over $290 million. In 1950, a Nebraska church exploded 5 minutes after choir practice was supposed to start. But miraculously, all 15 members of the choir were late that day for different reasons, and not a single person was hurt. When actor-comedian Red Fox was dying of a heart attack while on set, nobody offered to help him. This was because everyone thought it was nothing more than the fake heart attack act he was famous for. A Chinese woman attending her son's wedding was quickly sent to tears when she noticed a birthmark on the bride's hand. Turns out the bride was her long-lost daughter, whom she'd been trying to find for over 20 years. In the only novel that Edgar Allan Poe ever wrote, 4 crewmen get lost at sea and end up eating the cabin boy named Richard Parker. In real life, 46 years later, an English yacht sank and the remaining 4 crewmen resorted to eating the cabin boy to survive. That boy's name was Richard Parker. A Bosnian couple began cheating on each other when they both started talking to another person online. When both groups decided to meet in person, the couple realized they'd been cheating on each other with each other. A family photo under the northern lights became a 1-in-a-million shot when they also captured a shooting star in the background. Ancient ruler Mithridates was so paranoid of being poisoned that he routinely drank toxins throughout his life to build up his immunity. When he was finally captured by the Romans, he tried to kill himself with poison but failed because he was completely immune. If you're ever feeling down in life, just remember you're not this guy. This Brazilian prisoner spent 5 years digging an escape tunnel only to realize he was too fat to fit out the other end. His only choice was to give up on his master plan and call for help. When China used to carry out executions with a bullet to the back of the head, the family of the condemned would be sent an invoice for the cost of the bullet. Christine Palilla was an outcast at school until 2 popular girls gave her a makeover. To say thank you, she shot both of them in the cooter before killing them. Within the walls of Alcatraz, Al Capone's mind completely melted to the point where he would throw his own feces at other inmates. He was paroled early simply because he was too much of a lost cause to be a threat. On his 20th birthday in 1970, Bill Murray joked with a random passenger on his flight that he had some bombs in his suitcase. Soon enough, authorities were called in and ended up arresting Murray for attempting to smuggle 10 pounds of marijuana. Prisoners waiting to be executed on death row in America are given a physical beforehand to ensure that they're fit enough to die. In 2006, a woman farted on a commercial plane and tried to cover the smell by lighting matches. This immediately called for an emergency landing and an FBI investigation. In 1995, a French court found a man guilty of killing a teenage girl, but he was able to avoid jail time by hiding out in Germany. 14 years later, the victim's father hired a private team to locate the killer and kidnap him. They ended up finding him and dumping him in front of a French courthouse, which would later sentence him to 15 years in prison. A man from Kerala, India set a Guinness World Record by putting 60,000 bees on his face for more than 4 hours. He says bees are his best friends and will only sting him if he treats them improperly. In order to tell whether a female is ready to mate, male giraffes will drink their urine. Sand tiger shark embryos fight to the death in their mother's womb and only the strongest survive. DNA testing revealed that this is due to embryos from different fathers competing to be born. Snails' teeth are the strongest known biological material on the planet. They're stronger than spider silk and can withstand pressure high enough to turn carbon into diamonds. According to a new study, fish eggs can survive and hatch after passing through a duck. This provides one explanation as to how completely isolated bodies of water can become stocked with fish. If your skin ever starts turning yellow like the photo on the left, you should see a doctor as soon as possible. This man had a condition called jaundice, which can indicate serious problems with the liver. These photos were taken before and after the man received a liver transplant. Before the murder of Shinzo Abe, the most recent political assassination in Japan happened in 1960. Leader of the Socialist Party, Inajiro Asanuma, was attacked by a 17-year-old wielding a sword. The brutal murder was captured live on television and broadcasted to millions across Japan. A group of researchers in Africa once hit a speaker near a herd of elephants and played a recording of one of their herd members who had died. The dead elephant's family suddenly went wild calling for him, and his daughter cried out for days afterward. The researchers later vowed to never conduct such an inhumane experiment again. This is a photo of Anne Frank's father Otto revisiting the attic where they hid from the Nazis. Sadly, he was the only surviving member of the family, as his 2 daughters died just weeks before their camp was liberated. In 1783, a boy was born with 2 heads, but one of the heads was upside down. Surprisingly, the other head was somewhat functional, and the boy even claimed that he could hear the other brain talking to him. Tigers are some of the most vengeful animals on the planet and will take revenge on anyone who has wronged them. In 1997, a Russian poacher shot a tiger and left him for dead before stealing part of his meal. The tiger later found the poacher's cabin and waited 12 hours for him to arrive before killing and eating him. The arm of Civil War General Thomas Stonewall Jackson has its own grave. In 1863, his arm had to be amputated after he was accidentally shot by his own Confederate troops. But he was so famous that no one could bear to throw the arm into the pile of discarded limbs. So instead, it was given its own burial. M&Ms were invented in 1941 so that American soldiers could enjoy chocolate that was heat-resistant and easy to transport during World War II. Initially, they were sold exclusively to the US military. During World War II, a Dutch minesweeper evaded the Japanese for 8 days disguised as an island. The crew covered the decks in trees and painted exposed surfaces to look like rocks. They moved only at night and anchored close to the shore during the day, eventually escaping to Australia. A few days before he was assassinated, President Lincoln told several people about a dream he had. In the dream, Lincoln saw a soldier standing beside a casket, and he could also hear people weeping. Still dreaming, Lincoln asked the soldier, "Who's dead in the White House?" The soldier turned to him slowly and replied, "The president." In the late 1980s, a woman went on a vacation getaway where singles could meet other singles. She quickly thought she had met the man of her dreams and decided to sleep with him that night. When she woke up in the hotel room the next morning, the man was gone and there was a small wooden coffin on the table next to her. Inside was a note that read, "You are now HIV positive. Welcome to the world of AIDS." In the 1920s, not much was known about the effects of radium. So when a group of women were paid to use glow-in-the-dark radioactive paint, they were told that it was completely harmless. But after years of licking the tips of their paintbrushes while using this radium-based paint, the devastating effects eventually became obvious. Many of these women developed a condition known as radium jaw, which caused horrible tumors around the mouth, and some of their jaws would literally fall off. The ancient Romans would often substitute criminals into plays for punishment. So if a character died in the story, a real criminal would die on stage. The ancient Aztecs built swords out of obsidian, which is said to be 50 times sharper than surgical steel. These swords were apparently sharp enough to decapitate not only a human with one strike, but also a horse. In 2016, a Somalian suicide bomber brought explosives onto a commercial flight with the intent of blowing up the plane. 20 minutes after takeoff, the explosives detonated and blasted a hole in the side of the plane. The bomber was instantly sucked out and ended up being the only fatality. In 1832, a man named John Rennie personally designed and carved his own headstone before dying. It's an acrostic puzzle that reads, "Here lies John Rennie, 46,000 different ways." In 1993, a Canadian lawyer named Gary Hoy claimed to a group of students that the windows in his building were unbreakable. To prove this, he threw himself at the window at full force. While the glass didn't break, the frame popped out, and Gary fell 24 stories down to his death. Actor Barkhad Abdi only received $65,000 for his award-winning role in the movie Captain Phillips. After production, he returned to selling mobile phones at his brother's shop in a Minneapolis mall. Dwayne Johnson's beard in the movie Hercules was made out of the testicle hair of a yak. Actress Tammy Lynn Leppert, who played a small role in the movie Scarface, disappeared soon after filming. She hasn't been seen nor heard from since 1983, when she was only 18 years old. Paranormal Activity had a budget of only $15,000 but made nearly $200 million at the box office. During the first screening, people started walking out, and studio executives thought that the movie was bombing. They later learned that the viewers were leaving because they were too scared to continue watching. This is a comparison of a pug in 1880 versus what the breed looks like today. The pug was selectively bred to feature an extremely flat face, which has contributed to severe breathing difficulties as well as eye problems in many of these dogs. If a person dies on a plane during a flight, their body is typically moved to an empty first-class seat until the plane lands. After the Titanic disaster, the U.S. Congress passed a law requiring passenger vessels to carry more lifeboats. But the added weight made one ship called the SS Eastland too top-heavy. In 1915, the ship capsized before even leaving the dock, killing 844 people. Ben Salomon was a dentist in the U.S. Army who was shot 24 times while defending a medical center against the Japanese during World War II. He died after killing up to 98 attackers and allowing the wounded to be evacuated. His Medal of Honor was delayed until 2002 because medical officers were not supposed to bear arms against the enemy. Also during World War II, American soldier John Fox died after deliberately calling an artillery strike on himself. Realizing that German troops were overriding his position, the strike delayed the enemy long enough for other American units to organize a counterattack. In 2008, robbery convict Rene Lima Marin was accidentally released from prison 90 years early. Following the accidental release, he got a job, got married, and had kids. He also coached youth soccer and was very active in his local church. But when authorities noticed the errors 6 years later, they sent him back to prison to serve out the rest of his sentence. In the 1950s, there was a serial killer in Thailand who was so feared by the people that he was publicly executed. Afterwards, he was put on display in a glass box so that everyone could see that he was really dead. You can still publicly view his body today. Pablo Escobar's nephew still lives in one of the drug lord's apartments in Medellin. He recently found $18 million in cash hidden away in a plastic bag behind a wall. He told Colombian media that a vision told him where to look for the cash. A Russian man who tried to rob a hair salon ended up as the victim when the female shop owner overpowered him. She tied him up naked and used him as a sex slave for several days. Peruvian Mayor Jaime Rolando Urbina Torres broke the nationwide lockdown to go drinking with friends. When authorities attempted to apprehend him, the drunken mayor jumped into an empty coffin that was lying near him and pretended to be dead. It is widely believed that Shrek was modeled after Maurice Tillett, aka the world's ugliest man. He was a celebrated pro wrestler in the 1940s who suffered from acromegaly, a condition that results in bone overgrowth and thickening. Despite the rumors, DreamWorks has never openly commented on this. All of the snow used in The Wizard of Oz was 100% pure asbestos. The 1981 movie Roar is considered to be the most dangerous film to ever shoot. Over 70 crew members who worked with the animals suffered injuries like bone fractures, scalpings, and gangrene. Much of the footage capturing the injuries was included in the film, resulting in a lot of real blood on screen. Lil Wayne accidentally shot himself in the chest when he was 12 years old. A policeman by the name of Uncle Bob came to his rescue after multiple officers stepped over him. Until as recently as 1985, doctors believed that babies couldn't feel pain and performed surgeries on them without anesthesia. Due to their unique spinal structure, elephants are not meant to carry heavy loads on their backs. They often suffer severe spinal injuries as a result of carrying tourists around for several hours each day. Sonny Graham was dying of heart failure when he got the call about a new heart. The donor was 33-year-old Terry Cottle, who had just committed suicide by shooting himself in the throat with a shotgun. After a successful transplant, Sonny started writing to Terry's widow Cheryl. The two ended up falling in love and getting married. Soon people started to notice that Sonny was taking on some of Terry's personality and characteristics. He started liking things that he never enjoyed before, like beer and hot dogs, which were some of Terry's favorites. 12 years later, Sonny committed suicide the exact same way as Terry, with a shotgun to the throat. During World War II, JFK was stranded in the Solomon Islands and ended up carving a message into a coconut. A native islander delivered it to the closest US military base and saved his life. When he became president, Kennedy used the coconut as a paperweight on his desk in the Oval Office. This is a 1942 photo of Japanese troops using prisoners of war for target practice. During World War II, a German pilot spotted an American pilot's crippled plane in the sky. He noticed that the gunner was dead, the crew was injured, and that they didn't pose any threat. So instead of destroying the plane, he led it to safety and spared the men's lives. 40 years later, the two pilots reunited and became fishing buddies. In 1957, a stray dog named Laika became the first animal to ever orbit the Earth when she was the occupant of the Soviet spacecraft Sputnik 2. The dog was originally reported to have died painlessly in orbit about 1 week after blastoff. But nearly 50 years later, it was revealed that she likely died from overheating and panic just a few hours after the mission started. The entire planet Saturn is less dense than water. This means that if there was a pool big enough for it, the planet would float. Soviet cosmonaut Sergei Krikalev got stuck in space during the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. Since the country that sent him into space had no longer existed, his return home was delayed. He stayed in space for 311 days, twice as long as the mission originally called for. 17-year-old Tyler Hadley murdered his parents for being too strict. He beat both of them to death with a hammer and then spent 3 hours cleaning up the crime scene. He then threw a house party with 60 people while the bodies were still in the bedroom. He even showed the bodies to a few friends, but was eventually caught due to word of mouth at the party. A 70-year-old man robbed a bank in Kansas City and then sat down in the lobby and waited for the cops to arrive. He said he'd rather live in jail than with his wife. In 1993, a Missouri man damaged a levee on the Mississippi River simply to delay his wife from coming home so that he could party. Instead, the river ended up flooding over 14,000 acres. The 23-year-old man was convicted for intentionally causing a catastrophe and was sentenced to life imprisonment. Photographer Atif Saeed nearly got himself killed in order to capture this photo, which was taken just moments before the lion tried to attack him. He drove up to the lion, sat on the ground next to his car, and left the door open. The door being left open was the only reason he was able to escape unharmed. In case anyone is wondering what happened to the dinosaurs, here's what a baby blue heron looks like. The Bajau people of Southeast Asia are considered sea nomads. They have no homes, money, or nationalities, and they spend 60% of their time underwater. They can go spearfishing at depths greater than 200 feet without scuba gear or oxygen tanks. They've even developed much larger spleens than the average human thanks to evolution. This is a photo of a Chicago mother hiding her face in shame after putting her children up for sale in 1948. The two that are circled were sold to an abusive family for $2 apiece so that their mother could afford to pay rent. Their new father would often chain them up in a barn and force them to work long hours on his farm. He even frequently called them slaves even though they didn't know what it meant at the time. In 1867, Carolyn Walter died from tuberculosis when she was just 17 years old. So her devastated sister Selma paid a sculptor to carve a beautiful headstone to remember her by. And every morning after Carolyn's funeral, a fresh flower was found tucked under the arm of her statue. This tradition still continues today, more than 150 years after her death, and no one knows who leaves them. After her daughter died of yellow fever in 1872, a heartbroken mother wanted to make sure that her daughter was never alone in times of need. Since the daughter was terrified of storms, the grave was constructed with an entrance leading to a staircase that descends to her coffin. During thunderstorms, the mother would go to the graveyard and enter the tomb to comfort her child. Convicted rapists in Saudi Arabia are often executed by public beheadings. Disney's first water park, called River Country, closed in 2001 after an 11-year-old boy died from a brain-eating parasite he got in the lake. The park still lies completely abandoned to this day. A man in Washington state found a caterpillar that looks like it has the image of a human face on its back. The internet is pretty sure it was the reincarnation of Edgar Allan Poe. Otters in the Amazon are apex predators that can grow up to 6 feet long. They have been known to prey on small anacondas and caimans when fish are unavailable. The giant groundsel is a prehistoric plant that is only found on top of Mount Kilimanjaro. For years, scientists didn't know what created various massive cave networks in South America. In 2010, they learned that the caves were actually tunnels dug by ancient giant ground sloths. In 2005, an Ethiopian girl was being brutally beaten by 7 men when a pride of lions chased them away. They even stayed with her until help arrived. Some experts say the lions might have spared the girl because her crying sounded like the meowing of lion cubs. Other experts suggest that they were just getting ready to eat her when authorities arrived. About 400 million years ago, before trees dominated the landscape, the earth was covered with giant mushrooms. In 1986, an Indian man set a world record by spending 72 hours in a cage with 72 of the world's most venomous snakes. He was seeking to spread awareness that snakes don't bite unless provoked. He came out of the cage unharmed without a single bite. In 2002, a 15-year-old boy became inspired by the terrorist attacks on 9/11. He decided to steal an airplane and fly it into a building in Tampa, Florida. It ended up damaging only one office room, and he was the only person that died. This is a female mental patient from 1904 with her diagnosis of premature dementia carved into her back. Alan Turing was the man who broke the Enigma code during World War II. He is estimated to have shortened the war by 2 years and to have saved more than 14 million lives. He was later charged for being a homosexual and was forced to undergo chemical castration. 2 years later, he committed suicide by cyanide poisoning. Famous Austrian composer and painter Arnold Schoenberg had triskaidekaphobia, aka a fear of the number 13. He feared the number so much that he called it 12A instead of 13. For years he was terrified that he would die on Friday the 13th when he was 76, since 7 plus 6 equals 13. In fact, he was so scared of that day that he stayed in bed all night until he essentially scared himself to death. He died of a heart attack just minutes before midnight. As per his request, the creator of Pringles had his ashes stored in a Pringles can when he died. 18 months after colon surgery, an Australian woman returned to the hospital when she was experiencing severe stomach pain. Apparently, the surgeons had accidentally left their scissors inside of her abdomen. In the mid-2000s, a child molester living in Thailand posted various pictures of himself online depicting his abuse to young boys. But the man used an editing app to swirl his face, coining him the notorious nickname Swirlface. In 2007, Interpol managed to unswirl his face and reveal his true identity. Christopher Paul Neal was subsequently arrested for the sexual abuse of at least 12 young boys. He was released from prison in 2017 and now lives in Vancouver, Canada. A 43-year-old man named Jason Vukovic, who was sexually assaulted as a boy, used an online sex offenders registry to track down pedophiles and beat them with a hammer. He was sentenced to 23 years in prison for multiple first-degree assault charges. Japanese death row inmates are not told the date of their execution. They wake up each day wondering if today might be their last. The 1902 St. Pierre volcanic eruption killed all 35,000 people in the nearby town except for one man. He only survived because he was the worst prisoner in town and lived deep in a solitary confinement cell. In 1978, Charlie Chaplin's body was stolen and held for ransom, but his widow refused to pay ransom demands of 400,000 euros because she said Charlie would have thought it to be ridiculous. His body was found in a cornfield 11 weeks later, and the two suspects were apprehended. A woman in Florida once spent 6 straight years sitting on a couch. She died during a surgery that attempted to remove her skin that was grafted into the fabric. Frank Hayes was a jockey who suffered a fatal heart attack and died in the middle of a horse race in 1923. His body, however, remained on the saddle throughout the race, as his horse Sweet Kiss crossed the finish line ahead of the rest, thus winning the race. This was the first time Hayes had ever won a race, and the last. In 2010, excavators at Ground Zero found an 18th century wooden ship underneath the rubble. For more than 200 years, it lay hidden beneath the ground upon which the World Trade Center once stood. This is the Oseberg ship, a 9th century Viking ship that was found almost perfectly preserved in a burial mound in Norway. After a bowhead whale was killed in Alaska by local whalers in 2007, an old harpoon tip was found in its neck. Biologists estimate that the 6-inch harpoon tip dates back to 1880, meaning the 50-ton whale had been coasting around Arctic waters since Victorian times, thus proving that the bowhead whale is the oldest living mammal on Earth. JFK's little sister Rosemary was born mentally ill, and the Kennedy family didn't want to be embarrassed by her. So they paid a surgeon to perform a lobotomy on her when she turned 23. During a lobotomy, the surgeon would shove a metal rod into the skull through the eye socket and scramble the frontal lobe. Rosemary was awake the whole time, and doctors asked her questions while they were cutting away at her brain. When she suddenly stopped verbally responding, they ended the surgery. Following the operation, Rosemary Kennedy was never able to walk or talk again. She was institutionalized for the rest of her life until she died at the age of 86. At his luxurious estate in Puerto Triunfo, Pablo Escobar put together a private zoo filled with giraffes, hippos, elephants, and other animals. Some of the animals, left abandoned upon Escobar's death, have since thrived and reproduced. It is now estimated that more than 60 hippos roam the surrounding areas, and have even become a local invasive species problem. When anglerfish mate, they melt into each other and share their bodies forever. The deep sea is so vast that when a male finds a female, he must latch on and fuse to her, losing his eyes and internal organs until the two fish share a bloodstream. After an accident at the Tokemura nuclear plant in 1999, nuclear technician Hisashi Ouchi received a fatal dose of radiation. The dose was believed to be nearly equivalent to the energy produced at the hypocenter of the Hiroshima atomic bomb. Ouchi's exposure to the radiation was so severe that his chromosomes were basically melted and his white blood cell count plummeted to near zero. Unfortunately for Ouchi, doctors saw this as an opportunity to see how long they could keep him alive. They gave him revolutionary cancer treatment, as well as many skin grafts and blood transfusions. On the 59th day, he suffered 3 heart attacks in under an hour. The treatment went on and on for 83 days total, until Ouchie finally died from organ failure. One of serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer's victims nearly escaped his gruesome fate. In 1991, a 14-year-old boy named Konarak ran naked into the street, heavily drugged and covered in blood. In his brain-injured state, Konarak struggled to explain his situation when authorities arrived. Dahmer eventually found the boy with the police and convinced them that the boy was his 19-year-old lover. Despite bystanders pleading for his life, the officers returned the boy to Dahmer's apartment. They noticed a strange smell in the apartment, which was the decaying corpse of a previous victim in the bedroom, but made no attempts to investigate. Later that evening, Dahmer sexually abused, killed, and dismembered the boy. One of the actors in The Exorcist went on to become an actual serial killer. Paul Bateson, who plays a nurse in the film, eventually confessed to the killing and dismembering of 6 gay men in the late 1970s. He was released from prison in 2004. In 2014, a family bought a $1.3 million dream home in Westfield, New Jersey. But they never moved in because they immediately started receiving sinister, threatening letters from someone called The Watcher. He would write messages like, "All of the windows and doors allow me to watch and track you as you move through the house. Have you found what is in the walls yet? I am pleased to know your names now and the name of the young blood you have brought to me." The family has been unsuccessful in their attempts to resell the property. In 1941, a Polish soldier named Witold Pilecki volunteered to be placed in a concentration camp to prove to the Allies that the Holocaust was real. While a prisoner at Auschwitz, he organized resistance movements and eventually escaped after 3 years of imprisonment. Until he escaped, little had been known by the rest of the world about how the Germans ran the camps, as they were thought to be internment camps or large prisons rather than death camps. In 1958, the U.S. Air Force lost a 7,600-pound hydrogen bomb in Savannah, Georgia. It remains unfound somewhere in the Wassaw Sound to this day. In 2015, 3-year-old Jair Sims was found dead in a park in Maryland while his mother was pushing him on a swing. It is believed that she pushed him on the swing for 45 hours straight, even in the rain. Ramisha Sims, who is schizophrenic, had suffered from a psychotic breakdown while playing with her son at the park. By the time she woke up, her son had died as a result of hypothermia and dehydration. She was found legally insane and not criminally responsible for the tragedy of her son. The loudest sound ever heard on Earth was the eruption of Krakatoa in 1883. The explosion had a nuclear yield 13,000 times greater than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. It ruptured the eardrums of sailors 40 miles away, and people as far as 3,000 miles away reported hearing it as a distant roar of heavy guns. To put that into perspective, it would be like sitting in Boston and hearing a sound that came all the way from Ireland. It was one of the most destructive volcanic eruptions in history, since at least 35,000 people died and the global temperature was lowered by 2 degrees Fahrenheit for 5 years. A grieving mother from Florida added a sandbox to the gravesite of her baby boy so that her older son could play with him. Forced standing was a barbaric form of treatment that was believed to be a cure for insanity in the 19th century. The mental patient would be forced to stand in a compact cell for days at a time with very limited food, water, and outside contact. This is a real photo of a patient enduring this treatment at a Texas mental institution in 1890. In 1977, the University of Evansville men's basketball team was involved in a tragic plane crash. The crash killed every player on the team, except for one man who didn't make the trip due to an injury. 2 weeks later, the only remaining player was killed by a drunk driver. Jake Thompson was home alone when he had both of his arms ripped off in a farming accident. However, he still managed to get up and dial 911 with a pencil in his mouth. He miraculously survived and both of his arms were reattached. For centuries, there was a paint pigment called mummy brown that was made out of the ground-up remains of ancient Egyptian mummies. The color was manufactured until 1964, when the supply of ancient mummies was finally expended. This is a photo of 2 engineers embracing for one final hug while standing on top of a wind turbine engulfed in flames. One of the men jumped to escape the fire while the other one was burned alive while attempting to reach the staircase. Wonka and the Chocolate Factory was shot in West Germany in 1970. Producers for the film had a hard time finding little people to cast as Oompa Loompas since so many of them had been killed by Nazis during the Holocaust. During the Cold War, CIA agents used a secret method of communication based on how their shoelaces were tied. In 2016, a Chinese man realized the object he had been using to cut open walnuts for 25 years was actually a live stick grenade from the Vietnam War. This is an incredible photo of an orangutan using a spear-like item to catch fish. According to many scientists, orangutans are entering their own Stone Age, meaning they're beginning to discover the use of basic tools. The vision of the pronghorn antelope is comparable to a human wearing wide-angle 10 times power binoculars. In other words, on a clear night, they can see the rings of Saturn. The great patoo is an extremely rare tree-dwelling bird from tropical America. The bird is known for its eerie nocturnal cries and its stump-like appearance, making it a spooky master of disguise. Not to mention, it looks like an alien bird. A man from South Africa adopted a hippo after it was rescued from a river. 5 years later, the hippo dragged him into the same river and mauled him to death. Armed with giant canine teeth, hippos kill more people each year than lions, elephants, leopards, buffalo, and rhinos combined. They can run at speeds up to 30 miles per hour despite weighing up to 4,000 pounds. So yeah, don't get a pet hippo. Point Nemo is officially known as the oceanic pole of inaccessibility, aka the point in the ocean that is farthest away from land. It is surrounded by more than 1,000 miles of ocean in every direction. At any given time, the closest humans to this point are most likely to be astronauts. The woman who voiced the demon Pazuzu in The Exorcist had a son who killed his whole family. He then proceeded to shoot himself in both temples simultaneously. And he did all of this while wearing a Freddy Krueger mask. The White House owns a doomsday plane in the case of an end-of-the-world event. It is a modified Boeing 747 that can apparently withstand terrorist attacks, a nuclear bomb, and asteroid blasts. It can also stay airborne for days without refueling. In 2011, Tokyo officials went to congratulate the oldest man in the city on his 111th birthday. But instead, they found his mummified remains laying on his bed. He had been dead for 30 years and his family was still collecting the pension money that he was receiving. Pleistocene wolf is so well preserved that it looks like it could still be snarling today. It was found in Siberian permafrost, in the spot that it likely died some 40,000 years ago. This 2,000-year-old Roman bathhouse found in Algeria is still in use today. This is a sample of amber containing the bone, tissue, and feathers of a coelurosaur from the Cretaceous period. Researchers believe that this has the potential to be the most conclusive evidence so far that dinosaurs were feathered. A 45-year-old woman named Christine Barnett adopted a 6-year-old girl in 2010. The woman was recently charged with abandoning her daughter in Indiana and fleeing to Canada back in 2013. However, Barnett claims that her daughter is actually a 22-year-old sociopath with dwarfism who is pretending to be a child. She also claims that the girl has attempted to kill her on multiple occasions. She says the girl has tried to push her into an electric fence, has poured bleach into her coffee, and has threatened to stab her in her sleep. The woman claims that the adoption was a scam and that the girl was actually born in 1989. In 1939, a mentally disabled 23-year-old man named Joe Arity was falsely accused of the rape and murder of a teenage girl. He was sentenced to death in Colorado, and the moments leading to his execution are nothing short of heartbreaking. Joe was known for playing with a toy train given to him by the warden, who called Joe the happiest prisoner on death row. It was clear, however, that Joe didn't understand the situation or his impending execution. For his last meal, he requested ice cream and even saved some for after the execution. He was reported to have smiled while being brought to the gas chamber and was only momentarily nervous until the warden grabbed his hand and reassured him. Arity was officially pardoned 72 years after his death, after evidence had proven that he was coerced into confession. In 1980, autistic savant Mark DeFriest was sentenced to 4 years in prison after quote-unquote stealing tools left to him in his father's will. However, his original sentence has since developed into 34 years after 13 escape attempts, 7 of which were successful. Known as the Houdini of Florida, DeFries could replicate any key by memorizing their pattern and reconstructing them out of anything available. Serial rapist Billy Milligan had a mental disorder that split his mind into at least 24 different personalities. Each personality featured a different speech pattern, accent, and sitting position. He was famously acquitted in court due to the claim that 2 of his alternate personalities had committed the crimes without Milligan being aware of it. The young man on the left broke into his neighbor's house wielding a knife and threatened to kill the old man. But 72-year-old Frank Cordy happened to be a former boxing champion, and he gave the burglar a lawful beatdown. The Antwerp diamond heist in 2003 was one of the biggest robberies in history. A Belgian man stole $100 million in diamonds after bypassing 10 levels of high security. He had almost gotten away with it, but was convicted via DNA evidence on a salami sandwich that he'd left near the crime scene. Venus is a 1 in a billion cat whose face is half black and half red tabby. Veterinarians have argued whether Venus is a chimera or if her split face is just pure genetic luck. This octopus had a genetic mutation that gave it 96 tentacles instead of 8. A family of people with blue skin lived in Kentucky for many generations. They were known as the Blue Fugates, or the Blue People of Kentucky. They are thought to have gained their blue skin through a combination of inbreeding and a rare genetic condition known as methemoglobinemia. The harpy eagle is considered to be the largest and most powerful bird in the rainforest. Its rear talons can grow up to 4 inches long, about the same size as a grizzly bear's claws. It's certainly no mistake that this majestic bird is literally named after a mythological monster. This is what a baby swordfish looks like on someone's fingertip. This little guy will grow to be over 1,000 pounds one day. Calathris archeri, aka the devil's fingers, might look like a creature with tentacles upon first glance, but it's actually a fungus. It is also known as the octopus stinkhorn because it smells of rotting flesh. In its early stages, it looks like an alien emerging out of a pod, and many people have mistakenly reported it as such. These are what the vestigial limbs of a beluga whale look like. When sailors first explored the Arctic waters, they understandably mistook beluga whales for real-life mermaids. These are what the muscles look like on a fully grown male Siberian tiger. This rare orchid, known as the flower of the Holy Spirit, only blooms once per year. It looks like a group of praying saints before blooming, but once it blooms, it turns into a flying dove. The cave lion has been extinct for over 13,000 years, but this cub looks like it could have died yesterday. Frozen in time thanks to Russian permafrost, this specimen might be as many as 50,000 years old. And experts say it has great potential for cloning in the future. This is what ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics looked like before the colors faded over time. A massive 1,700-year-old Roman mosaic was uncovered by city workers who were performing sewer construction in Israel. The incredibly detailed mural is believed to have served as the living room floor for a wealthy family during the Byzantine period. If you had to guess how long ago this elephant died, what would you say? If your answer was 42,000 years, you'd be correct. Lyuba is an incredibly preserved woolly mammoth calf that was found in Russian permafrost. With her skin and internal organs still fully intact, Lyuba is by far the best preserved woolly mammoth mummy ever found. This is King Tut's 3,300-year-old iron dagger and golden sheath. Discovered in 1925, the dagger's blade was made from a meteorite. In 2001, the Taliban used dynamite to demolish this 4th century Buddha statue that was carved in Afghanistan. While initially devastating, it was found that the explosions had revealed 50 caves that were untouched for 1,600 years. Inside the caves, researchers uncovered some ancient Buddhist relics, including the oldest oil paintings in the world. In 2016, brothers Bob and James Stockless both won the lottery on the same day with randomized numbers. But one was way happier than the other since Bob won $7 while his brother James took home over $290 million. In 1950, a Nebraska church exploded 5 minutes after choir practice was supposed to start. But miraculously, all 15 members of the choir were late that day for different reasons, and not a single person was hurt. When actor-comedian Red Fox was dying of a heart attack while on set, nobody offered to help him. This was because everyone thought it was nothing more than the fake heart attack act he was famous for. A Chinese woman attending her son's wedding was quickly sent to tears when she noticed a birthmark on the bride's hand. Turns out the bride was her long-lost daughter, whom she'd been trying to find for over 20 years. When Queen Elizabeth visited the set of Game of Thrones in 2014, she refused to sit on the Iron Throne. She was simply following an old law that prohibits the Queen from sitting on any foreign throne. Reading the Bible or watching porn are both strictly forbidden crimes punishable by death in North Korea. In 1972, Neil Armstrong visited the town of Longholm, Scotland. When he got there, he was read a 400-year-old law declaring that any Armstrong found in the town should be hanged. Here's a 1955 photo of a woman being ticketed for wearing a bikini on a public beach in Italy. U.S. law requires that eggs sold in supermarkets must be washed, while UK law requires that eggs sold in supermarkets must not be washed. Both do it to prevent salmonella. In ancient Rome, men found guilty of rape had their testicles crushed between two stones. Mississippi didn't make it illegal to buy or sell a child until 2009. Only after a woman tried to sell her granddaughter online for $2,000 and a car. Legislators realized there was no law to punish her under, so they finally made one. In the 1920s, not much was known about the effects of radium. So when a group of women were paid to use glow-in-the-dark radioactive paint, they were told that it was completely harmless. But after years of licking the tips of their paintbrushes while using this radium-based paint, the devastating effects eventually became obvious. Many of these women developed a condition known as radium jaw, which caused horrible tumors around the mouth, and some of their jaws would literally fall off. The ancient Romans would often substitute criminals into plays for punishment. So if a character died in the story, a real criminal would die on stage. The ancient Aztecs built swords out of obsidian, which is said to be 50 times sharper than surgical steel. These swords were apparently sharp enough to decapitate not only a human with one strike, but also a horse. JFK's little sister Rosemary was born mentally ill, and the Kennedy family didn't want to be embarrassed by her. So they paid a surgeon to perform a lobotomy on her when she turned 23. During a lobotomy, the surgeon would shove a metal rod into the skull through the eye socket and scramble the frontal lobe. Rosemary was awake the whole time, and doctors asked her questions while they were cutting away at her brain. When she suddenly stopped verbally responding, they ended the surgery. Following the operation, Rosemary Kennedy was never able to walk or talk again. She was institutionalized for the rest of her life until she died at the age of 86. In 2010, excavators at Ground Zero found an 18th century wooden ship underneath the rubble. For more than 200 years, it lay hidden beneath the ground upon which the World Trade Center once stood. This is the Oseberg ship, a 9th century Viking ship that was found almost perfectly preserved in a burial mound in Norway. After a bowhead whale was killed in Alaska by local whalers in 2007, an old harpoon tip was found in its neck. Biologists estimate that the 6-inch harpoon tip dates back to 1880, meaning the 50-ton whale had been coasting around Arctic waters since Victorian times, thus proving that the bowhead whale is the oldest living mammal on Earth. Actor Barkhad Abdi only received $65,000 for his award-winning role in the movie Captain Phillips. After production, he returned to selling mobile phones at his brother's shop in a Minneapolis mall. Dwayne Johnson's beard in the movie Hercules was made out of the testicle hair of a yak. Actress Tammy Lynn Lepper, who played a small role in the movie Scarface, disappeared soon after filming. She hasn't been seen nor heard from since 1983, when she was only 18 years old. Paranormal Activity had a budget of only $15,000 but made nearly $200 million at the box office. During the first screening, people started walking out, and studio executives thought that the movie was bombing. They later learned that the viewers were leaving because they were too scared to continue watching. The arm of Civil War General Thomas Stonewall Jackson has its own grave. In 1863, his arm had to be amputated after he was accidentally shot by his own Confederate troops. But he was so famous that no one could bear to throw the arm into the pile of discarded limbs. So instead, it was given its own burial. M&Ms were invented in 1941 so that American soldiers could enjoy chocolate that was heat-resistant and easy to transport during World War II. Initially, they were sold exclusively to the US military. During World War II, a Dutch minesweeper evaded the Japanese for 8 days disguised as an island. The crew covered the decks in trees and painted exposed surfaces to look like rocks. They moved only at night and anchored close to the shore during the day, eventually escaping to Australia.